Hello and welcome to the Air and Space Live Chat. I'm Marty Kelsey, one of the hosts of STEM in 30, an Emmy-nominated TV show produced for students by the National Air and Space Museum. We produce a lot of great student-friendly content, and the best thing about them, they are all free. Our most recent episode just came out, and it's all about unexpected careers. We look at NASA and some of those jobs that you may not expect, including scuba diver, photographer, and even smeller. And yes, smeller is a real job. And if you want to learn more about it, be sure to check out that episode. Today, we want this program to be all about you. First of all, let us know what questions you have down in the comments section. We're going to get to as many of them as we can. Also, we want to know where you're watching from. Put your location down in the comments and we'll be giving shout outs throughout the show. And if you're with a school, let us know what school you're with. So right now, I'm going to introduce our guest for today, and we're going to try to get them a lot of questions to get them stumped. Let's bring in Exhibit Design Manager Hannah Kim and Objects Conservator Lauren Horlick. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right, so let's jump in. Hannah, tell us, let's establish kind of who everybody is. Hannah, tell us what it is that you do for the museum.
So I'm an exhibit design manager, and I have a background in obviously exhibit design and architecture. So I help manage and develop the new exhibits for the museum. We are undergoing a transformation of about 23 galleries. So I help work with the designers. We have exhibit design contractors who we've hired to help us develop new galleries, and we work with them to, establish the vision, ensure that the content is really sort of aligned with where our curators and larger exhibit teams want them to go, ensuring that we work closely with conservation and PRU to also ensure object safety. So there's a very large, talented, and diverse team that I work with on a daily basis, and we all have to collaborate to really execute this vision and see it to fruition.
And I'm an educator, and so the whole museum redesign process is super new to me, and I actually get to be on a team with Hannah, and it's really interesting to see all of the things that go into building a new gallery in the museum. We'll get into more of that later, and if you have specific questions, let us know what those are. Now, Lauren, where are you, first of all, and then tell us about your job.
All right. Well, I'm in the conservation lab at the Udvar Hazy Center, and hopefully everybody has come out to this museum since it's open while the downtown museum is closed. So we are in the lab right now. This is my normal workbench, and behind me are some artifacts that I'm working on. And one of my colleagues is working behind me. She is treating a book. And so like I said, I'm an objects conservator, and conservation is a field that combines art and science and a little bit of material science. So if you're interested in these two fields, conservation is probably a good thought for you. We are very interested in understanding how materials deteriorate over time. So our main mission is to figure out how to keep all of the objects in the museum preserved for future generations. So everything that I do is essentially to ensure that all the things that are in the museum, no matter when they were made or who made them or what material it's made from, that it will still exist long into the future. So sometimes it involves an intervention, and sometimes it involves thinking about how we work with the designers like Hannah to design an exhibit case that the artifacts live in.
And we'll get into some of those things that are sitting behind you here in a little bit. I'm anxious to see some of those. Hannah, we've got a question here. When designing an exhibit that sees so many visitors, what all kind of things do you have to take into consideration?
Great question. We have to make our exhibits very rugged. So not only do we want them to be really fun and approachable and accessible, but they have to withstand millions of visitors who come through our museum, and all different types of visitors. And so they need to be really strong. They need to be accessible so that somebody with all different types of abilities can access our content. And we have to ensure that we can repair them if needed on a really sort of quick turnaround so that they're ready for our visitors the next day.
And when Hannah talks about millions of visitors, the National Air and Space Museum downtown location, typically in a normal year, pre-pandemic, what, about 8 million visitors a year? And
Correct.
we go back and forth between, I think, us and the Louvre as being the most visited museum in the world. So things get a lot of wear and tear, which I think is something when you walk in a museum you don't always think about. Don't forget, let us know what questions you have down in the comments section. Let us know where you're watching from. And if you've got a museum near you, we'd love to know about it. We are all museum nerds and love to visit different museums. So let us know what your favorite museum is. Obviously, ours is Air and Space, but let us know what yours is down in the comments section. Lauren, we've got a question here. As a conservator, what kind of science courses did you take?
Great question. So for my master's degree, so if you're a conservator, you must get a master's degree in conservation. And the science classes that I took to get the master's degree were general chemistry, organic chemistry, and material science classes. Some people will take a physical chemistry class as well, so PChem.
Awesome. So I've got a question just came in for both of you. What's the most difficult object that you've had to work with? And Hannah, I'm guessing that's on the design side of things, and Lauren on the conservation side. So I'd love to kind of see the juxtaposition there. So Lauren, why don't you start us off?
Okay. All right. Difficult. I feel like there's a lot of different avenues that we could go with there, but I'm going to say that the Spirit of St. Louis was difficult in some ways because it's so iconic and so precious that it was honestly a little terrifying to work on. This is, of course, Charles Lindbergh's plane, first plane ever to fly across the Atlantic. And to work on this was a huge honor. And so there was a lot of expectations to manage, and also we had a time frame to work on it within. So the difficulty for me, I think, was just in overcoming the, oh my God, this is Charles Lindbergh's airplane. And then some of the issues with the craft were that the fuselage, many people don't know this, it's actually made from fabric. And it's fabric that's been impregnated with a material called cellulose nitrate dope. And it had some silver particles added to it to make it reflective. And so over time, this particular material does not like it if it's exposed to too much fluctuations in temperature and relative humidity. So it starts to kind of expand and contract. And so you start to see some cracking of the dope. So to figure out how to repair that was quite challenging. And also doing that in front of an audience, because we did it in front of everybody when we were redoing the Milestones of Flight gallery. So, doing challenging work on a very iconic artifact in front of thousands of people was challenging.
I remember when the Spirit of St. Louis was lowered down, and what was cool about that is it gave us an opportunity to actually raise another iconic airplane up into the rafters for just one day only, and that was Wonder Woman's Invisible Jet. So if you go to YouTube and look up Wonder Woman's Invisible Jet on display at the National Air and Space Museum, you'll see the video where we put it on display for one day. I believe that was in April of 2015. So it's been a while now, but Hannah, what about you? What's the artifact that's given you the most difficulty?
They're all special and challenging in their own ways. We have a lot of really large artifacts, so they require a lot of additional study in terms of engineering and access. Because they're big, we have to figure out the logistics of how they're going to be shipped to the museum, how we're going to rig it up. We have this incredibly talented team working on that. And then there are a lot of other sort of licensing requirements outside of just the artifact, depending on what we get. So I think one of the more challenging ones that our team has worked on in the common space that I'm helping to manage, which are all the sort of shared areas of the museum, is the new X-Wing that'll be on display. And that one is had to come over from the UK. So it was quite complicated in the middle of a pandemic. There was a lot of work that had to go into coordinating how we were going to get that shipped over to the museum, who was going to be involved. The team I know on the NASM side, the PRU and conservation teams did a lot of work on that to make sure it was ready for installation. And then just the licensing involved, because it is a Lucasfilm prop artifact, or not prop, but I should say, an actual plane that was featured, so in Star Wars. So a lot of work went into just ensuring that the language and our label was correct and everything.
I am very excited to see that. I saw it when it was in the conservation lab or in the restoration hangar. I have not
Yeah.
seen it since it's been moved downtown. So I'm very anxious to see that. So if you're watching today, let us know in the comments, what are you most excited about seeing, the X-Wing or the Starship Enterprise when it comes back on display? Which one is the one that you're looking forward to? Also, we had somebody give a couple of shout outs to favorite museums in the Chicago area, the Adler Planetarium. We all love the Adler Planetarium. Former colleague of ours works there now. The Museum of Science and Industry, which is awesome. And the Cernan Earth and Space Center, which I have not been to, but it is now on my list. So thank you for that. I appreciate it. All right, the next question we've got is, how do you get a plane to hang from the ceiling?
Is that a question for me?
I think so, yeah.
Probably better for you, yeah.
So we work with incredible folks, the PRU. So we have preservation and rigging and the rigging team, and they are experts in really getting our large aircraft up hanging in the museum. And so they're brought over. A lot of studies and plans are done ahead of time. We work closely with our other sort of life safety coordinators to ensure that, things like sprinkler heads and sort of structural capacity is all met, and it's all very complex. So a lot of people have to come together to make sure it can go up. And then, the floor is cleared. A lot of studies are done, like staging diagrams and plans to ensure we have floor space to bring the planes in, study how they're going to be positioned in every different step, and then they're hoisted up into place.
Can I add to that just for a
Please.
minute that most of the craft are designed to be hung. So most of the time, the hang points that are designed into it are utilized.
Awesome. Now, Lauren, the next question we have is for you. Somebody wants to know, what's with the lion? And this is a great
the lion
story.
that's behind me. This
Yes.
is a cutout that was made by the exhibits department that Hannah works for of Gilmore the flying lion. So Gilmore, this isn't a real lion, of course. This is the real artifact, which you can see in the upcoming Nation of Speed gallery, which should be open in the fall. So we worked on Gilmore in the lab here just last year. But this is actually a good representation of what he looked like before we started working on him. And in the slide is what Gilmore looked like when we were finished with him. So the cutout, we liked keeping him around here because we feel like he's kind of our mascot, like the mascot of the lab. And he's good company. So, right, this is a good slide showing Gilmore how he was previously on display. And what's really interesting to note in this picture is that he's got that blanket draped over him. And when we took that blanket off, all of the fur that was under there was really, really vivid. It was extremely bright. And that was the original color of his fur. So because he had been on display previously with a little too much light, his fur got light damaged. And light damage is permanent and not reversible. So what we do when we work with exhibits, I work with Hannah, is to think about how we can reduce the light levels in the galleries to make sure that we don't again damage our artifacts with inappropriate light exposure. So Gilmore behind me came to the lab with a lot of fur loss. He also, in that prior slide, you saw that he wasn't inside of an exhibit case. So people were allowed to touch him, and they pet all of his fur off on his nose, and which you can kind of see in this picture and in a couple other spots. So it was because we didn't have a nice exhibit case designed for him, which we do now, thanks to Hannah. So this way we can prevent further loss. So we did add a fair bit of fur to him to compensate for that, so that he looks more like a lion.
So what is that like to go from one day working on an airplane, made out of metal or fabric, and the next day going to working on a lion?
That's a great question. It's really one of the things that I love most about my job is the huge diversity of materials. I really enjoy touching things. I feel like I learn more about the artifacts this way. So I have to say that the greatest thing about kind of working on these different things is to have these different approaches. There's always some kind of we like doing a lot of problem solving here. So yeah, I think conservation is great. Same as with exhibit design, it's a lot of three-dimensional problem solving, and that's probably one of the greatest things about working in this museum. There's always an interesting problem to be solved.
Awesome. Well, we've got a few minutes left. Be sure to put your questions down in the comments section and let us know where you're watching from. We'll be giving shout outs throughout the show. Hannah, the next question coming in is for you. As a designer, how do you choose the colors for these galleries, and are you working on a certain mood?
Yeah, I mean, mood and tone are all really integral to how we want an exhibit to be developed. So, for example, do we want something more playful and more interactive versus something that is a bit more serious or thoughtful? And so color plays a big part in that. And, we have discussions with our designers and the larger team, graphic designers and fabricators to think about, how will all these different colors come together. So, yes, like we usually think about that tone, the emotional kind of aspect, what we want visitors to sort of feel when they come through. And accessibility is also really important, just making sure that there's enough visual contrast for, written context, like that there's, you can see the yellow on this sort of title panel for How Things Fly, which we're developing right now, is, in high contrast to the darker blue background. So just making sure that visitors can easily see and read the content.
And I'm a little partial to this gallery that we have the images of right now. This is the team that I serve on as one of the educators. And what's really interesting on these teams, and Hannah and Lauren, you can both talk to this, is that these teams designing these new galleries are made up of an incredibly diverse group of people. You've got designers and curators and educators and the folks that hang the aircraft. So Hannah and Lauren, can you two talk about those teams and what it's like to work on those teams?
Sure. I mean, it's always fascinating. I learn a lot working with these teams. Passions can be high sometimes because everybody comes from, a really sort of a place of really caring about what they do. I think everybody loves what they do here at the museum. And so, everybody has different goals, right? For instance, like a historian and curator really wants to make sure that the content is being covered in a thoughtful and very truthful way. And then an exhibit designer wants to ensure that the content is accessible and memorable to visitors and fun. Depending on the type of content. Educators, are also there to make sure that the content is accessible and that they can ensure that key concepts are being understood. And so I think there's an inherent tension, which actually makes everything really fun, right? If it's all smooth sailing and no conflict, it would be too easy. And I think, what ends up happening is we massage everything together and end up with, exhibits that really have been thought through very thoroughly in every aspect possible.
And yes, we do count the number of words that are on display in the gallery. Lauren, how about you?
Yeah, everything that Hannah said is very true. Our role as conservators in the gallery organization process is really to advocate for the artifacts that they are going to be safe for long-term exhibit. So we work with the designers in particular to think about the lighting, like I was saying, for Gilmore, and also for visitor accessibility. So a lot of the time the curators would like something or it won't fit inside of an exhibit case. So we want to make sure that there's enough of a distance between people and the objects so that they can't touch them too much. Like I was saying with Gilmore, that his fur was pet off basically. So we need to think about distances between the artifacts and people, and then of course inside of the exhibit case, distances between the objects. We do a lot of logistics and we do a lot of compromising and thinking about how these artifacts will look best together. And an interesting thing about my work is looking at the objects and what they're made from in particular, because in some cases you shouldn't have certain materials together. For example, anything that's fur emits sulfur. So if anyone's interested in chemistry, sulfur is very bad for anything that's silver. It'll start to tarnish it. So we are the people that advocate to, to basically say you have to segregate that. And certain objects require a particular temperature or a humidity level. So the spacesuits, for example, we keep them in their own cases, and they have a chamber beneath them where material is added to keep the relative humidity very low. So some materials like that and some don't. So we do a lot of the kind of invisible stuff, behind the scenes stuff.
Awesome. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left. Let us know what questions you have and where you're watching from. We'll be giving some shout outs if you let us know. And then again, let us know what your favorite museum is down in the comments section. Hannah, the next question's coming in, and it asks for you to talk a little bit about ADA requirements and accessibility when designing a gallery.
Mm-hmm. We have a lot of, requirements related to ADA accessibility, and we obviously have to meet all the ADA rules related to wheelchair access and visibility, sort of cane detection, all of that. But we also think about beyond just meeting the minimum ADA requirements. We think more in relation to sort of universal design, just making sure that there is enough contrast for type, that the video interactives are at a certain angle so that visitors of different heights and viewing angles, from children to adults, folks in wheelchairs, folks who may have low vision, can sort of access and get information from this content, so we have opportunities for audio guides, that kind of thing, and things that aren't necessarily required as part of ADA, but are considered important just to increase accessibility of our content to a larger audience.
It's been interesting for me to be involved in some of those discussions about, well, how are we going to, make this more accessible? And then through those conversations, that piece of the exhibit gets so much stronger, and I think that's a really cool part about, being involved in the background of helping design these new galleries. Lauren, the next question's for you. Somebody wants to know about the skeleton we see behind you.
The skeleton we see behind me, I can take the camera off, but I might make everybody a little dizzy if I do that. So this is, I'll try to do this in a way that isn't horrible. This is from World War I. It is cut out from a plane, and it is the squadron insignia. So this is from a SPAD 13. And yeah, this is the squadron's insignia. And this is the back of it, looks like, which hadn't been seen since basically 1918. And behind me is another insignia. This is French. It's underneath of that acrylic with some weights because it had come into the collection rolled. So whoever donated it had rolled it up. So the curators had never actually seen the colors on it until it was able to come to the lab, and we were able to relax it and open it so that they can learn more about the historical relevance of this particular piece.
That's really interesting how the conservation side is actually influencing the research side of things. I never thought of it in those
research. Yes, exactly. That's one of the things that I like the most about my job, is that we're kind of the scientists of the museum. So if the curators want to know what pigment did they use to paint this and what was the binder used, I can tell them that using non-destructive methods. So we frequently enhance the curatorial record by using non-destructive scientific techniques to tell them what the materials are.
Awesome. We've got somebody watching from Chantilly, Virginia. I was just out there today, and their favorite museum is the Stephen F. Udvar-Hazy Center. So thank you for watching. Hopefully next time you're out there, if you see one of us, give us a high five. We'd love to see you. Also, we've got Bethesda, Maryland joining. Thank you so much. And keep those questions coming in. We've got some really good questions here. Why is it important that people don't touch the planes? You talked about the lion's nose, and I think we understand that you're going to, wipe off the fur or the nose or whatever. But these planes, aren't they pretty strong?
Not as strong as you would think. If anybody remembers that the airplane, the flak bait, it's the B-26 Marauder. It's currently in our restoration hangar right now. The very nose of it had been on display since 1976 and was very accessible to the public. And a lot of the paint had become rubbed off in one area, so it's just bare aluminum. And that is from 45 years of people touching it in this one particular spot. It's about a foot by a foot wide. And this is what can happen over time, is that the material just becomes lost. So another reason is that our fingers, our hands in particular, contain salts and oils, which when they come in contact with metals can actually etch the metal. So we have seen artifacts that come to the lab with fingerprints on it. And that is something we can't do anything with. Once the metal is etched, it's etched. So this is why we ask people to not touch the artifacts.
Wow. And you both have mentioned this today, and that's the cases that we're putting things in. Hannah, can you talk a little bit about the decisions to put stuff in cases and versus not put stuff, and then how high do we have to hang things and all of those decisions?
Yeah, I mean, obviously the cases are there first and foremost to protect our objects and artifacts. So, just to ensure that we can control the sort of conditions within which they sit, but also, we can do things like light the artifacts carefully. We can incorporate graphics behind them and, think about sort of how we can make that experience a little bit more special. So I know Lauren is the expert on this and she could speak more to the specifics of the case requirements. But, I think what we do is we can really kind of look at a case as an environment for the variety of objects and artifacts that we want to display, and think about the sort of layered conditions with the graphics behind, set a sort of scene or a stage or diorama for our content so we can tell a story. And we have labels in the front that give you more specific details about what it is that you're looking at.
All right, well, we've got one more museum shout out, the Tom Stafford Air and Space Museum in Weatherford, Oklahoma. Again, I have not been there. I think my parents went there, so I'll have to visit there. It is now on my list, so thank you for that suggestion. We've only got time for one more, and this might be a pretty simple question, and it may be more complex than I anticipate. When is the museum downtown going to reopen?
That's sometime this fall, so stay posted.
So this fall, you can come see the new museum. That opening date, make sure you follow the museum on social media. It's going to be amazing. The work that Hannah and Lauren and a whole bunch of other people that you will never get a chance to see and are behind the scenes have done just absolutely amazing work to bring this new kind of reimagined museum with all new stories and some old stories that we're telling in new ways, and the artifacts that you're used to seeing and new artifacts. So real quickly, Hannah, what's the one thing in the new museum that you want to see that you're really excited about?
The one thing, oh my gosh, it's so hard to choose just one. I already talked about the X, and we have the T-38, which will be great. It's Jackie Cochran's T-38 that'll be hanging on the west end of the museum, and we'll have a special sort of women in aviation section. So it'll be exciting to be able to feature that object.
Nice. Lauren, how about you?
I think a lot of the Space Hall objects are going to be really great. There have been a lot of really fascinating objects that have come through the lab that I'm excited to see in their new exhibits.
Awesome. Well, when the museum opens in the fall, we hope everybody comes and joins us. And until then, head out to the Stephen F. Udvar Hazy Center in Chantilly, Virginia, where you can see the SR-71 Blackbird, as well as Space Shuttle Discovery. Before we leave you today, I want to share a couple of things with you. We just wrapped up our latest season of STEM in 30. Each 30-minute episode covers a different topic. And over the last 9 months, we've touched on astronomy, where we look at astronomy you can do at home. We have an episode on Amelia Earhart that looks at her life, her disappearance, and her legacy. And we even have an episode on The Wizard of Oz, where we break down the science and flight in this classic movie. And it's kind of amazing how many things fly in that movie. Also, we want to let you know that we're going to be on YouTube exclusively. Right now is a good time to subscribe to the National Air and Space Museum's YouTube channel, so hit that subscribe button. And if you enjoyed this program, be sure to follow STEM in 30 on Facebook and Twitter. And we always love hearing your feedback. Please send us an email to stimmin30@si.edu. And again, we want to thank everybody for watching. Have a good afternoon.